The Kurds say they don't have the money or infrastructure to care for them and have urged Australia to bring them home. So far, Australia has allowed the return only of a group of 8 orphans, and there are no plans to take back the IS family members anytime soon. This is Adam Harvey in Beirut for Saturday AM.
Back home now, and as part of the ongoing effort to close the gap in education levels, the federal government's planning to extend the family tax benefit for families of Indigenous boarding school pupils. At the moment, the payment to families of ab-study boarders ends when they turn 16, but this change would see it continue until they reach Year 12. Political reporter Alexandra Beach has more.
Jaden Cooper turns 18 today and is on his way to finishing Year 12. He's a boarder at Harlebury-Rendell School in Darwin, but that's a long way from home.
I'm from Coburg Peninsula, pretty remote. I live on the beach, so I get to see the sea every day.
He'll become the 4th child in his family to graduate and says watching his siblings go through school motivated him to stick with it.
I saw them graduate and then I was going to drop out, but then I wanted to be just want to keep that line of graduating going through the family because none of our parents did it or our uncles or aunties have graduated from school before.
Jaden is one of 72 Indigenous boarders at Harlebury-Rendell School. They all receive funding through ab-study, a means-tested payment for Indigenous students. But at the moment, their parents have their family tax benefits cut once their child hits 16. The federal government wants to extend that so the payments continue until a student finishes Year 12. The change is currently being considered by a parliamentary committee, which held a public hearing in Canberra yesterday. The principal of St Ignatius College in New South Wales, Paul Hine, fronted the committee to back this change, calling it a no-brainer.
What we have here is a critical juncture, in my view, where at the age of 16, a family tax benefit that could assist the families in the final stages of education is removed.
But the committee also heard there were broader flaws in the system. Lorraine Bennett from Remote Indigenous Parents Australia said the process of applying for ab-study was too difficult.
She did all this identification and immunisation, all these questions, and a few kids haven't got birth certificate because their surname is different to what they have now.
Jaden Cooper's principal, Craig Glass, says ab-study also falls far short of covering the total cost of getting these students through high school. So he questions the decision to boost family tax benefits over education funding.
Indigenous boarding is in a financial crisis to some extent, and if there's money that's spare, I'm suggesting that it may be best to prioritise that to put it into their schooling.
Government representatives, including Debbie Mitchell from the Department of Human Services, said they were working to make the system more accessible.
Ab-study can be now accessed by phone from anywhere in Australia. So we have a staff-assisted process that's easier with the removal of a signed paper declaration.
In a statement, Social Services Minister Anne Ruston says the government's committed to finding new ways to make it easier for people to claim ab-study and has been conducting workshops this year to help boarding schools also better understand the program.
Alexandra Beach reporting. In the wake of this week's Great Barrier Reef water quality report, Queensland farming groups are digging in their heels and rejecting calls for greater regulation of their members' practices. The long-term outlook for the World Heritage Area has gone from poor to very poor for the first time. One of the causes of the poor water quality is runoff from farms, but only a small minority of cane farmers are taking part in the programs to tackle the problem, as Isabel Rowe reports.
North Queensland cane farmers are already at loggerheads with the state government over its attempts to reduce farm runoff.
I think it's become a political argument and I think agendas are at play.
Industry group Cane Growers released this video this month, part of a campaign against legislation to tighten regulations for farmers around sediment runoff.
What this bill does is creates uncertainty.
But in the wake of another grave health report for the Great Barrier Reef, Queensland Government's Environment Minister Leanne Enoch warns she won't back down.
Anybody who stands up and opposes The responsible reef regulations that the Palaszczuk government has brought before the Parliament are simply dismissing the science.
The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority's 5-yearly assessment of the reef makes concerning predictions. Even with recent efforts to reduce threats and improve resilience, it rates the overall outlook as very poor. To help reduce runoff of sediment and chemicals, governments want 90% of cattle and cane farmers signed up to best management practice. But in the cane industry, less than 10% of farmers are using the government's preferred programs. Chief Executive of Cane Growers Dan Gallagher argues that while that number seems small, it's actually a quarter of farmland.
1 in 4 hectares, or 25% of the land under cane in Queensland is under this accredited program. It's got international recognition.
Dan Gallagher says many cane growers are hesitant to change their farming technique.
What I'd say is change is difficult. The most complicated thing for many farmers is to get around the process of adopting particularly changed practices around irrigation. Often that's a real challenge because they've invested dollars in certain irrigation practices.
And he says some remain sceptical of the science behind the government's proposed regulation.
I think generally farmers are saying, look, if you're going to regulate me, I want to be confident about why you're doing it. Yes, they're hesitant because they don't want to be regulated further. They don't see that regulation is actually the best solution here. And as an industry organisation, we actually agree. Through the adoption of best practice.
The Marine Park Authority's report references almost 1,500 pieces of research on the reef, and a spokeswoman for the authority says the final report was reviewed by 4 experts in the field. But cattle lobby group AgForce insists questions remain. Chief Executive Mike Gearan wants the reef science to be independently reviewed before it's used to create regulation for his industry.
We are simply asking that we have a very brief pause and we have that review to ensure that what we do, which has enormous implications and costs for different industries, is correctly targeted.
Who would be doing that review? Who is the independent reviewer?
Well, again, it's an independent review, so I'm not a scientist, but the importance of that independence cannot, again, be understated.
But that would suggest that the science that's being relied on now isn't independent.
No, the science has been done by eminent scientists, and that's really important. But like any science or any other endeavour, it is important that there's independent review of that.
The federal and state governments are investing more than $600 million to try and reach health targets set in the Reef 2050 plan.
Isabel Rowe reporting.